My name is Vanessa Hartman. I'm 32 and I'm sitting alone in an apartment that still smells like his shampoo, trying to understand how my life detonated in less than 48 hours without leaving a single scorch mark on the walls. If you'd asked me last week whether I trusted Carlos Cole, I would have said yes without flinching. 4 years together will do that to you. It smooths the sharp edges off doubt. It makes me feel like a place you can put your keys and your future plans. Carlos had a key to my apartment. His clothes took up half my closet. We had a joint lease, the kind you sign when you stop pretending you're casual and start building a life. We'd been talking about making it official next month, moving from this half-in, half-out rhythm to something sturdier, maybe even house hunting. The conversations weren't fantasies anymore. They were spreadsheets, neighborhoods, and weekends blocked off for showings. So when Carlos told me Thursday morning that he was flying to Las Vegas for a guy's weekend, his best friend hitting a milestone birthday, big celebration, the usual, I didn't feel threatened. I dropped him at the airport, kissed him goodbye, told him to have fun. Normal stuff. The kind of normal you don't appreciate until it's ripped out from under you. Saturday afternoon, I was on the couch with a bowl of leftover pasta, half watching a football game I didn't really care about when my front door opened. At first, my brain refused to process it because it didn't fit the schedule. Carlos wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday. He walked in like someone trying to remember how to move naturally bag slung over his shoulder. Eyes a little too bright, skin a little too pale. Not happy, not sad, just off. Like he'd stepped into the wrong life and was hoping nobody would notice. Carlos Fifer set the bowl down. You're back early. He dropped his bag by the wall and stood there staring at me like I was the only solid object in the room. I smiled, trying to keep it light, because that's what you do when you love someone, and you assume there's a reasonable explanation waiting behind their weird energy. Everything okay? I asked. He didn't answer right away. His throat worked like he was swallowing something sharp. Then he said, "Something happened in Vegas, and I need to tell you before you find out another way." My stomach dropped so fast I felt it in my fingertips. The first thought wasn't marriage. It was the obvious one. Cheating. A woman's name I didn't know. A mistake he'd blame on liquor and bad influence. I muted the TV without taking my eyes off him. Okay, I said, because I didn't trust my voice to do anything else. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. I got married. For one insane second, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my mind needed something, anything to keep from cracking. I genuinely thought he was joking, like this was some stupid Vegas story meant to impress me with its chaos. He didn't laugh back. Friday night, he rushed on words, tripping over each other. We were so drunk, and there was this woman I knew from college, Madison Reyes, and we went to one of those chapels and I married her. But it doesn't mean anything. I was wasted. I love you. You're the one I want to be with. I stared at him, and the room felt too bright, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath to see what I'd do. Carlos Cole, my boyfriend of 4 years, had married someone else while we were together, while we were literally talking about buying a house, while his mother had asked me what kind of ring I liked, like it was a normal question and not a prophecy. You married someone else, I repeated slow, as if the syllables might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. It was a mistake, he insisted, stepping forward, like closeness could fix it. A drunken mistake. We can get it annulled. It's not real. That word real hit me like an insult, as if reality was something he could negotiate. That's big, I said, and my voice came out weirdly calm, like it belonged to someone else. You can't be married to two people. We're not married, he snapped, immediately defensive. You and me, I mean. We're just dating. Just dating. 4 years. A joint lease. Shared holidays. His father calling me family over Thanksgiving like he meant it. His clothes in my closet. His key on my keyring. The way he'd looked at me last month while we measured the living room wall and talked about where the couch would go when we moved. Carlos's eyes filled with tears, and for a second I saw the version of him I knew, the one who could cry during sad movies, the one who held my hand in crowded places, the one who whispered apologies when he stepped on my foot. But that version was standing in the shadow of a man who'd signed his name on a marriage license and walked back into my home expecting me to clap for his honesty. I know, he said, voice breaking. I know, and I'm so sorry, but I came back to you. That has to mean something. It did mean something. It meant he thought I'd accept anything as long as he showed up. I stood up. My hands were steady, which scared me a little. I walked to my bedroom like I was following a script I'd never rehearsed, and I picked up my phone. Carlos followed, his panic rising as he realized I wasn't collapsing into forgiveness. What are you doing? He demanded. Reporting a crime, I said. He blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. What are you insane? I dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered 911, "What's your emergency?" Carlos's face drained of color. "Hi," I said, and my voice stayed calm even as my heart tried to punch its way out of my chest. My boyfriend just told me he got married to someone else this weekend in Nevada. We're in a committed relationship. We live together. I believe this is bigamy. Carlos lunged for the phone. "Hang up," he hissed. "Hang up!" I turned my shoulder away from him, not dramatic, just firm. The dispatcher sounded confused, asking me to clarify. I did. I explained the length of the relationship, the shared lease, the fact that he'd just confessed to marrying Madison Reyes while still with me. The dispatcher's tone sharpened when she said bigamy was a felony and asked if I wanted to press charges. "Yes," I said. "No," Carlos shouted at the same time, like volume could change the truth. The dispatcher asked for our address. I gave it. She told me officers were on the way. Carlos collapsed onto the couch, hyperventilating, as if he was the victim of my reaction and not the cause of it. "You're ruining my life over a stupid drunken mistake," he gasped. "You married someone else," I said, and that sentence tasted like metal. "You married someone else yesterday and walked in here today like it's no big deal." 20 minutes later, there was a knock. 2 officers stepped into my apartment, the air shifting with their presence. Carlos sat frozen on the couch, staring at the wall like he could disappear into it. I explained everything again louder this time because the world had witnesses now. I showed the lease with both our names. I showed texts from last week about furniture shopping. I pulled up the photo Carlos had posted on social media Friday night, him and Madison Reyes holding up a marriage certificate, his grin wide enough to split his face, captioned like it was a joke. One of the officers looked at Carlos. "Did you get married in Las Vegas on Friday, November 3rd? Carlos nodded. Crying. And the sound of him crying almost made me sick. Not because I didn't care, but because it felt like he was trying to wash himself clean with tears. "And you're currently in a relationship with Ms. Hartman?" the officer asked. "Yes," Carlos whispered. "But we're not married." "Married." The officer's eyes flicked to the lease, then back to Carlos. The questions continued, and each answer Carlos gave sank him deeper. When the officer asked if I wanted to press charges, I said yes again, because my life was not a rehearsal for someone else's selfishness. That's when Carlos's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and went even paler, like his body recognized the danger before his mind did. He answered too fast, and the call went to speaker for a split second before he fumbled it. Baby, a woman's voice echoed into the room, bright, confused, intimate. "I've been trying to call you. Did you make it home?" Carlos yanked the phone away, but it was too late. The officers had heard. I had heard. And in that tiny slice of sound, I felt the last fragile thread of maybe this was just dumb snap clean in half. Because Madison Reyes didn't sound like a mistake. She sounded like someone who thought she was a wife. The apartment felt haunted after they took Carlos away. Not haunted in a dramatic way, no slamming doors or flickering lights, but in the quiet, ordinary sense. His shoes were still by the door. His hoodie was draped over the back of the chair like he might come back for it in an hour. The indentation on the couch where he'd been sitting didn't spring back right away like the furniture itself was reluctant to let go of him. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. My brain refusing to accept that my boyfriend of 4 years had just been arrested in my kitchen for marrying another woman. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. At first, then I realized it was his mom. "What did you do to my son?" I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. By the third call, my hands were shaking, not with doubt, but with the adrenaline crash that comes after you stop holding yourself together. I finally answered. "How dare you?" his mother said, immediately skipping hello like it was unnecessary. Her voice was sharp, furious, vibrating with entitlement. "How dare you have Carlos arrested?" "He married someone else," I said. I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded, even to my own ears. "He made a mistake," she snapped. "He was drunk. It doesn't count." "I'm pretty sure the law doesn't work like that," she scoffed. "You're being dramatic. This is a private matter. You didn't need to involve the police." It stopped being private when he involved a second marriage. There was a pause, just long enough for her to change strategies. When she spoke again, she was crying. "Please," she said, voice trembling. "He's scared. He's alone. This is going to ruin his life. He loves you so much. He came home to you. Doesn't that tell you anything?" It told me everything. "I'm not dropping anything," I said quietly. She hung up on me. Her husband called the next morning. Carlos's father didn't bother with tears. "You're a vindictive woman," he growled into the phone. You know that you're ruining my son's future over a Vegas joke. Jokes don't come with marriage licenses. If you don't fix this, he warned, you're going to regret it. Is that a threat? I asked. He hung up. By Sunday afternoon, I was emotionally exhausted in a way I didn't know was possible. Like every nerve had been rubbed raw. I was standing in my kitchen, forcing myself to drink water, when someone started pounding on my door. Not knocking. Pounding. I froze, my heart slamming into my ribs. I didn't move right away. Instead, I walked slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, mid to late 20s, hair pulled back too tight, mascara smudged under her eyes like she'd cried and wiped it away aggressively. She looked frantic, angry, terrified all at once. I opened the door but kept the chain on. Yes, I said. She exhaled sharply like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. Are you Vanessa? Yes. Her jaw clenched. I'm Madison. Madison Reyes. The name landed like a physical thing, heavy and undeniable. I need to talk to you, she said, about my husband. My stomach twisted. You mean Carlos? Her eyes flicked past me into the apartment confusion flashing across her face. You're his roommate. I almost laughed. Almost. No, I said, I'm his girlfriend, of 4 years. The hallway seemed to tilt. What she whispered. I could see the exact moment her certainty cracked. The story she'd been holding on to, whatever version Carlos had sold her, started to fall apart in her eyes. We lived together, I continued, not unkind, but not cushioning it either. Joint lease, 4 years. He left here on Thursday as my boyfriend. Madison shook her head violently. No, that's not possible. He told me he was single. He said his last relationship ended years ago. We celebrated our anniversary in July, I said. Her face drained of color. She pulled her phone out with shaking hands and started scrolling, thrusting it toward me through the small gap the chain allowed. Photos of them together flashed by restaurant selfies, poolside shots, one that made me look away because it was too intimate to process without screaming. All from Friday and Saturday, she said, her voice breaking. He told me he came back here to deal with logistics, to pack his things. He said he was moving to Vegas. I stared at her, the anger in my chest rearranging itself into something colder and sharper. He lied to both of us, I said. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor outside my apartment, hands in her hair. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God. I married him. Yes, I said, you did. And now he's in jail, she said faintly. For bigamy. She looked up at me, panic flooding her face. Am I in trouble? No, I said. You didn't know. He did. She nodded rapidly like she needed that reassurance more than air. I need to get this annulled. Immediately. My parents are going to lose their minds. I already gave a statement, I said. The detective will probably want to talk to you. She swallowed. I'll cooperate. I swear. I didn't know about you. I would never have done this if I did. I believed her. Not because I wanted to, but because her shock was too raw, too unfiltered to be an act. We sat there for a moment, two women connected by the same lie, neither of us knowing what to do with the wreckage yet. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and laughed bitterly. His mom. Good luck, I said. She stood wiping her face. I'm sorry, she told me. And for the first time since Carlos walked back into my life married, I felt something close to validation. I really am. After she left, I locked the door, slid down against it, and finally let myself breathe. I didn't cry. I just sat there listening to the echo of everything I thought I knew, collapsing under the weight of what was real. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was crying or replaying Carlos's voice in my head, but because my brain had flipped into a hyper-alert state, like it was convinced that if I let my guard down, something else would ambush me. Every sound in the apartment felt too loud. The refrigerator humming, a car door slamming outside. My phone lighting up on the nightstand with messages I refused to open. Sometime around 6 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was Madison. I found more messages. You need to see them. My chest tightened before I even opened the attachment. Screenshot after screenshot filled my screen. Texts between Carlos and Madison dated months before the Vegas trip. Not casual check-ins. Not, hey, long time. These were emotionally intimate, carefully worded conversations. Complaints about feeling stuck, about wanting something real, about timing and patience. One message from early September made my hands go numb. I just need to figure out how to end things without blowing up my living situation. Maybe I can stay until we get set up. I read it 3 times, my brain stubbornly trying to reject what my eyes already knew. He hadn't made a drunken mistake. He had made a plan. Suddenly, every detail of the last few months rearranged itself into a new, uglier picture. The distracted way he'd been on his phone. the vague answers when I asked about the future, the reassurance that felt slightly rehearsed. He wasn't confused, he was strategic. I called Madison. "I'm sending everything to the detective," she said immediately, her voice tight and furious. "All of it. I'm not protecting him." "I'll do the same," I said. By Monday morning, I was sitting in a sterile interview room at the police station, a paper cup of bad coffee untouched in front of me. I handed over my evidence, our lease photos of us together, spanning years, texts about furniture shopping, and holidays messages, where he told his family we were serious. The detective flipped through everything, with raised eyebrows. "I've seen a lot," she said, "but this one's special." "Special," I echoed hollowly. She explained the next steps. Madison had already contacted them, shaken but cooperative, filing for annulment and providing the messages that showed fraud. The case wasn't just about feelings anymore, it was about intent. Court was scheduled for that afternoon. The annulment hearing was almost insultingly fast. Madison sat on one side of the courtroom, pale and rigid. Carlos sat at the defense table, hair disheveled, eyes darting anywhere but at me. When he finally looked up, there was something in his expression that felt like calculation, even then, like he was still searching for the angle that would save him. The judge didn't buy it. Fraud, deception, evidence of an existing committed relationship. The annulment was granted in under 5 minutes. Carlos's shoulders sagged, but not in relief, more like frustration that one of his safety nets had snapped. I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong. The criminal proceedings moved forward faster than I expected, and with them came Carlos's new strategy. His public defender claimed I had been controlling, emotionally manipulative, that Carlos had felt trapped in our relationship, and that the Vegas marriage was his attempt to escape an unhealthy situation. I sat in the courtroom, hands folded in my lap, listening to a woman describe me like a villain in a story I didn't recognize. According to them, I had isolated him from friends, controlled his finances, forced him into the lease, used emotional pressure to keep him stuck. I felt like I was dissociating, watching my life get rewritten in real time. My lawyer stood up calmly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't get dramatic. She just started laying out receipts. Separate bank accounts. Texts where Carlos suggested moving in together. Messages where he pushed for the joint lease. Social media posts of him calling me the best thing that ever happened to him days before Vegas. Statements from friends and family, mine and his, confirming our relationship was mutual, stable, and chosen. Then the messages to Madison. The months of planning. The talk of logistics. The judge leaned back in his chair, tired lines etched deep into his face. "The coercive control argument doesn't hold," he said flatly, "when the evidence shows months of preparation. This was not an escape. This was duplicity." Trial was set for January. Outside the courthouse, Carlos's mother tried to approach me. Security stepped in before she could get close. She screamed anyway. "You're heartless," she shouted. "You're enjoying this." I didn't respond, because the truth was I wasn't enjoying anything. I was surviving. That night I changed the locks. The next day I installed security cameras. Not because I was scared of Carlos, but because I was done underestimating the chaos that entitlement could bring into my life. And somewhere between drilling screws into my front door and deleting the last photo of us from my phone, I realized something that hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. The man I loved didn't just lie to me. He believed he deserved to get away with it. By the time January arrived, my life had shrunk. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but quietly, intentionally. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided who the villain was. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I took different routes home from work. I learned which grocery store aisles I could walk down without running into someone who knew the story and felt entitled to an opinion. Carlos, meanwhile, seemed to expand. Not emotionally, legally. His parents hired him a better lawyer. His defense got louder, more aggressive, more imaginative. Every filing painted me as some kind of puppet master, the cold girlfriend who forced commitment, the woman who weaponized the legal system when her partner tried to escape. It was surreal reading my own name attached to words like abusive and controlling. The trial lasted 2 days. I remember the courtroom temperature more than anything else, too cold, like the building itself was trying to numb everyone inside. The prosecutor laid out the timeline slowly, methodically, like they were telling a story that didn't need embellishment because the facts were outrageous enough on their own. Exhibits flashed on screens, messages between Carlos and Madison that spanned months, not days. Plans, promises, strategy. The Vegas marriage certificate photo where Carlos looked thrilled, not drunk or confused. Social media posts from the week before the trip, Carlos and me smiling at dinner, his caption calling me home. Madison testified first. She looked smaller than I remembered her from the hallway outside my apartment, but steadier. Her voice shook when she talked about how Carlos told her he was single, how he described me as a roommate with a crush he was handling. When she talked about finding out he'd been living with me the entire time, she cried, not loudly, just enough to show the damage underneath her composure. I wouldn't have married him if I'd known, she said. I loved who I thought he was. Then it was my turn. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking into a spotlight I hadn't auditioned for. Carlos wouldn't look at me. His parents did his mother with fury, his father with something darker like resentment sharpened into blame. I told the truth. About the lease, about the future plans, about him walking into my apartment and saying I married someone else, but I love you. About the calm that settled over me when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a boundary being tested. The defense cross-examined me hard. They asked if I'd ever argued with Carlos, if I'd ever asked him to spend less time with certain friends, if I'd ever cried during disagreements, if I'd ever said I'd be devastated if he left. Yes, I said to all of it. That's what relationships look like. They asked if I knew calling the police would ruin his life. I knew he'd committed a felony, I replied, and that consequences aren't optional. The jury watched closely. Some nodded. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one laughed. No one rolled their eyes. By the end of the second day, it felt like the air in the room had changed. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, my heart hammered so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Guilty of bigamy in the 3rd degree. Carlos closed his eyes. His mother sobbed. His father stared straight at me, like he wanted to memorize my face for all the wrong reasons. Sentencing came a week later. Probation, community service, a fine, no jail time because it was his first offense, and his lawyer argued he'd already suffered enough. He'd lost his job when his employer found out. His reputation was in pieces. The judge said he hoped Carlos would learn from this. Outside the courthouse, Carlos's mother cornered me before security intervened. Happy now, she spat. You destroyed him. He destroyed himself, I said. I just didn't cover for him. Madison texted me that night. It's over. Thank you for telling the truth. I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. I'm sorry we met like this. Her response came quickly. Me too. Trial season ended the way storms do not, with a single dramatic moment, but with exhaustion settling into everything. I thought relief would feel bigger. Instead, it felt quiet. And in that quiet, I finally understood that justice doesn't always bring closure. It just stops the bleeding. Stop. Part 5. Aftermath. Quiet healing and the cost of boundaries. When everything was finally over, nothing rushed in to replace it. No dramatic sense of victory. No cathartic release. Just silence, wide, clean, and unfamiliar. The kind of silence you only notice after months of noise stop all at once. I moved 2 weeks after sentencing. Not far. Just far enough that I wouldn't run into memories on every block. I found a smaller place across town, month to month, no shared walls with my past. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a takeout container and realized I could breathe without bracing for the next phone call. Therapy started shortly after. That's where I admitted the parts I'd kept locked away during the trial, the fear that my calm had been mistaken for cruelty, the humiliation of being publicly recast as an abuser, the anger at how easily people excuse betrayal when it wears the right face. My therapist didn't try to soften it. You held a boundary, she said, and people who benefit from your lack of boundaries are always the loudest when you enforce one. Madison and I stayed loosely in contact. Not friends, not enemies, something quieter. She told me Carlos's parents had pressured him to settle her wedding expenses to avoid another court fight. She was getting some of her money back, not all of it, but enough to feel acknowledged. Carlos tried once. A handwritten letter, 4 pages, apologies, therapy promises, claims that Vegas had been a moment of weakness. He begged me to forgive him, to help him move on, to drop the charges retroactively, like that was a thing that existed. I forwarded it to my lawyer. She advised me not to respond. Depending on the language, she said, this could be considered witness tampering. I felt nothing reading the letter. That surprised me more than anything else. His parents sent me an invoice for his legal fees. $8,000. I mailed it back with LOL, no written, across the top. I never heard from them again. Life didn't magically get better, but it got clearer. I worked. I saw friends. I watched football again without associating it with disaster. I went on a few dates, realized trust wasn't something you snap back into place like a rubber band, and stopped forcing it. My sister called the entire ordeal the wildest thing she's ever seen outside a reality show. My mom sent care packages with notes that said, "Proud of you for standing up for yourself." Sometimes that was enough. Carlos faded into the background probation fines, community service consequences that followed him quietly like they should have from the start. And me, I learned something expensive but permanent. Love doesn't require tolerance of disrespect. Forgiveness isn't mandatory when someone commits a literal crime against your life, and being calm doesn't mean you're cruel, it means you're done negotiating your worth. So that's how my 4-year relationship ended. Not with screaming or revenge, but with a phone call, a courtroom, and the realization that boundaries are not punishments. They're survival.